Hi, I'm Rachel. The sound of my husband's cruel laughter still makes my stomach turn. One moment, I was sharing the joy of our first pregnancy with family at dinner, and the next, Marcus was announcing that the baby probably wasn't even his and that I'd been desperate to trap him. Marcus thought he could humiliate me in front of our families to avoid fatherhood. He had no idea that my father, Air Force Colonel James Mitchell, would stand up from that table and show him exactly what happens when someone attacks a military family with lies and cowardice.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
My name is Rachel Mitchell-Torres, and 6 months ago, I thought I had built the perfect life with the man I'd loved since college. I was 29, a veterinarian at a prestigious animal hospital in Colorado Springs, married to Marcus Torres, a successful software engineer who worked for a major tech company. We lived in a beautiful ranch house near the mountains, complete with the sprawling yard that Marcus had insisted we needed for the family we'd always planned to start. Marcus had swept me off my feet during our senior year at Colorado State University, charming me with his ambition and confidence while I focused on veterinary school. He was everything my military family respected: educated, goal-oriented, and seemingly devoted to building a stable future together. When he proposed after my veterinary school graduation, it felt like the culmination of years of shared dreams and careful planning. My father, Colonel James Mitchell, had served in the Air Force for 28 years, currently stationed at Peterson Space Force Base as a senior operations commander. He'd raised me and my younger brother with military values of honor, integrity, and commitment that shaped every aspect of how I approached relationships and career decisions. Dad had initially been skeptical of Marcus, questioning whether a civilian could understand the demands and values of military family life. Rachel, marriage requires the same commitment as military service, Dad had said during our engagement. It's not about convenience or personal satisfaction. It's about honor, loyalty, and keeping your word regardless of circumstances. I dismissed his concerns as typical parental protectiveness, convinced that Marcus's love for me would translate into the kind of steadfast devotion that characterized successful military families. Our wedding 2 years earlier had been a beautiful ceremony at the Air Force Academy Chapel, attended by Dad's colleagues and Marcus's tech industry friends, and a celebration that seemed to bridge our different worlds perfectly. But marriage to Marcus had gradually revealed aspects of his character that his college charm had concealed. He was ambitious to the point of selfishness, viewing our relationship through the lens of what it could provide for his career advancement and social status. When I suggested starting a family, he agreed, enthusiastically. But I began to suspect his enthusiasm was more about the image of successful family life than genuine desire for children. The pregnancy had been planned, celebrated, and eagerly anticipated by both families. Marcus had been involved in every appointment, excited about nursery plans, and seemingly thrilled about becoming a father. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect way to announce our news to both families, wanting to create a memory that would mark the beginning of our child's story. The dinner was scheduled for a Sunday evening in March, with both sets of parents gathered at our dining room table to share what I thought would be one of the happiest moments of our marriage. I had prepared Marcus's favorite meal, arranged flowers from our garden, and carefully chosen the moment when I would reveal our pregnancy with a gift box containing ultrasound photos and a tiny pair of baby shoes. Everything seemed perfect as we sat around our dining room table, surrounded by the people who loved us most, preparing to share news that would change our lives forever. Dad was in his dress uniform, having come directly from a ceremony at the base, while my mother wore the elegant navy dress she reserved for special occasions. Marcus's parents had driven up from Denver, excited about what they assumed would be an announcement about his recent promotion at work. I had no idea that the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future was about to reveal himself as someone completely different from the person I thought I'd married. Marcus controlled every aspect of our dinner conversation with the calculated precision of someone orchestrating a performance rather than hosting a family gathering. He moved through the evening with an energy I'd never seen before, alternating between charming host and subtle antagonist in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable as the night progressed. Rachel's been acting so strange lately, Marcus announced during the main course, his voice carrying false concern that made my stomach clench. Mood swings, weird food cravings, sleeping all the time. I'm starting to worry about her mental health. I stared at my husband, recognizing the pregnancy symptoms he was describing, but shocked that he was presenting them as evidence of psychological instability rather than the natural changes we'd both researched and expected during early pregnancy. Rachel, those are normal pregnancy symptoms, I said carefully, though his public reframing of my condition made me doubt my own perceptions. We discussed this with Dr. Peterson during our last appointment. Marcus's smile was sharp enough to cut glass as he turned to address both sets of parents with theatrical sympathy. See what I mean? She's become fixated on this pregnancy idea, interpreting every little change in her body as confirmation of something that may not even be real. The attack was expertly crafted, designed to make me appear delusional while positioning himself as the reasonable husband dealing with an unstable wife. Colonel Mitchell's expression grew increasingly stern as he observed this dynamic, his military training recognizing psychological manipulation tactics, even in civilian settings. "Son," Dad said carefully, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect in combat zones around the world. "Pregnancy isn't something women imagine. There are medical tests that provide definitive confirmation." Marcus leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards in this conversation. "Of course there are tests, but Rachel has been so desperate to get pregnant that I'm concerned she might be misinterpreting results or even fabricating evidence to get the family reaction she's been craving." The attack was expertly crafted. My own husband was suggesting I was lying about our pregnancy in front of both families, undermining my credibility and mental health assessment with surgical precision. "Marcus, I took 3 different pregnancy tests, and we have ultrasound photos from Dr. Peterson's office," I said, my voice becoming smaller as he systematically destroyed my confidence in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to me. "Home tests can be faulty," Marcus replied smoothly, pulling out his phone to show what appeared to be medical articles about false positive pregnancy tests. "And ultrasound appointments are easy to fabricate when you're desperate enough to maintain a delusion." He had come prepared for this conversation with research, documentation, and talking points designed to make me appear mentally unstable while presenting himself as the concerned husband trying to help me face reality. The level of premeditation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Marcus's mother, Linda, looked between us with growing confusion. "Marcus, dear, are you saying Rachel isn't actually pregnant? Because she certainly looks like she's been having morning sickness when I've seen her recently." "Mother, that's exactly what concerns me," Marcus said, his voice taking on the patient tone used to explain complex situations to confused elderly relatives. "Rachel has been so committed to this pregnancy fantasy that she's actually making herself physically sick. It's a psychological condition called pseudocaesis, where women convince themselves they're pregnant and develop real symptoms." The clinical terminology was delivered with enough confidence to sound authoritative, but I could see Dad's expression growing dangerously focused as Marcus continued his psychological assassination of my mental health and credibility as a wife. The confrontation escalated when I finally found the courage to present the gift box containing our ultrasound photos and baby shoes, only to have Marcus intercept it before I could share what should have been our joyful announcement with both families. His movements were quick and possessive, as if he'd been anticipating this moment and preparing his response.
Actually, I think we should discuss something important before Rachel shares whatever she's planned, Marcus said, holding the gift box just out of my reach while addressing both sets of parents with the grave seriousness of someone delivering difficult news. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I felt my heart racing as I realized Marcus was about to sabotage the pregnancy announcement I'd been planning for weeks. Marcus, please give me the box. This was supposed to be our moment to share happy news together. Happy news? Marcus's laugh was cold enough to freeze the March air that drifted through our dining room windows. Rachel, we need to be honest with our families about what's really happening in our marriage. Colonel Mitchell set down his coffee cup with the controlled precision of someone whose patience was reaching dangerous limits. Son, what exactly are you suggesting? Marcus opened the gift box and examined the ultrasound photos with theatrical skepticism, as if he were evaluating evidence in a criminal investigation rather than looking at images of his own child. These photos could be from anyone's appointment. Rachel has been so desperate to get pregnant that I'm genuinely concerned she might have obtained these from another patient or even downloaded them from the internet. The accusation was so outrageous, so personally devastating, that I couldn't immediately formulate a response. My own husband was suggesting that I had fabricated medical evidence of our pregnancy to deceive our families. Marcus, those photos are from our appointment last Tuesday. You were sitting right beside me when Dr. Peterson showed us the heartbeat, I said, my voice cracking with disbelief and humiliation. I was at a client meeting last Tuesday, Marcus replied smoothly, pulling out his phone to show calendar appointments that supposedly proved his alibi. Rachel went to this medical appointment alone, which raises obvious questions about the legitimacy of any documentation she might have obtained. My mother gasped softly, her hand moving to cover her mouth as she processed the implications of what Marcus was suggesting. Dad's expression had shifted into something I recognized from his military service, the focused intensity that preceded decisive action against threats to his command or family. Furthermore, Marcus continued, warming to his performance, I think our families deserve to know about Rachel's recent behavioral changes, the secretiveness, the mood swings, the desperate focus on pregnancy despite our mutual decision to wait several more years before starting a family. The lie about waiting to start a family was particularly cruel because Marcus had been the one pushing for pregnancy, encouraging me to stop birth control, and expressing excitement about becoming a father. Now he was rewriting our history to support his narrative of me as an unstable wife forcing unwanted pregnancy on a reluctant husband. Son, Dad said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded respect in Air Force operations around the world. Are you claiming that your wife is lying about being pregnant? Marcus met Dad's stare with what appeared to be genuine conviction. Colonel Mitchell, I'm saying that Rachel has become so fixated on pregnancy that she's willing to fabricate medical evidence to force the family reaction she's been craving. I love my wife, but I think she needs professional help to address these delusions. The psychological warfare was expertly executed, designed to isolate me from family support while portraying Marcus as the reasonable spouse dealing with an unstable partner's mental health crisis. The complete destruction of our pregnancy announcement happened at exactly 8:42 p.m. when Marcus stood up from our dining room table and delivered the cruelest blow I could have imagined. He had been building toward this moment throughout the entire evening, systematically undermining my credibility so that his final attack would land with maximum devastation. I think our families deserve to know the truth about Rachel's supposed pregnancy, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone revealing important information that had been deliberately concealed. The truth is, even if she is pregnant, the baby probably isn't even mine. The words hit the dining room like a bomb blast, creating a silence so profound that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in our hallway. Both sets of parents stared at Marcus in shock while I felt my entire world crumbling around me. What did you say? I whispered, unable to process what I'd just heard from the man I'd trusted with my heart, my body, and my future. Marcus looked directly at me with cold calculation, as if he'd been planning this moment for weeks and was finally ready to execute his strategy. Rachel, you've been so desperate to trap me with pregnancy that you've obviously been looking elsewhere for the biological material to make it happen. The accusation was so vicious, so personally destroying, that I felt physically sick. My own husband was accusing me of infidelity in front of both our families, suggesting that our planned pregnancy was the result of an affair rather than our loving marriage. Marcus, we've been trying to get pregnant for months. This baby was planned, wanted, and conceived in our marriage, I said, my voice shaking with disbelief and growing horror. Marcus laughed with genuine amusement, as if my protests were confirmation of exactly the kind of desperate denial he'd been expecting. Rachel, I've been tracking your cycle, your behavior patterns, your opportunities for extramarital activities. The timeline doesn't add up for this pregnancy to be mine. He pulled out a notebook filled with what appeared to be detailed observations of my daily activities, work schedule, and social interactions. The level of surveillance was breathtaking in its thoroughness and paranoid in its implications. For example, Marcus continued, flipping through pages of handwritten notes, 3 weeks ago, you claimed to be working late at the animal hospital, but I called and they said you'd left at normal time. Where were you, Rachel? Who were you with? The accusation was based on a day when I'd gone to buy pregnancy tests after suspecting I might be pregnant, wanting to confirm before sharing the news with Marcus. Now my attempt to create a special announcement was being twisted into evidence of an affair. I was shopping for pregnancy tests, I said quietly, realizing how pathetic the truth sounded compared to Marcus's elaborate conspiracy theory. Pregnancy tests? Marcus repeated with theatrical skepticism. Or meeting with whoever you've been having this affair with. Rachel, the dates don't work for me to be this baby's father, assuming you're actually pregnant at all. Colonel Mitchell had been sitting in stunned silence, but now he rose from his chair with the controlled fury of someone whose family honor had just been attacked. Son, you're accusing my daughter of adultery based on a notebook full of paranoid surveillance? Marcus turned to face my father with the confidence of someone who believed his performance had been convincing enough to destroy my credibility permanently. Colonel Mitchell, I'm sorry you have to learn about your daughter's behavior this way, but our families deserve to know the truth about Rachel's pregnancy claims and her recent activities. The cruelty was breathtaking in its calculated precision, designed to humiliate me, destroy my relationship with my parents, and eliminate any family support I might have received during pregnancy.
The phone call from Dr. Peterson's office came the next morning while I was sitting in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, having fled there after Marcus's devastating accusations had destroyed what should have been our joyful pregnancy announcement. The nurse's voice carried confusion and concern that made my already fragile emotional state even more precarious. Mrs. Torres, we've received a very unusual request from your husband regarding your medical records. He's demanding copies of all your appointment documentation and questioning the validity of your pregnancy test results. My blood turned to ice as I realized Marcus was continuing his campaign to prove I was either lying about being pregnant or carrying another man's child. Sarah, what kind of request? He's claiming that he suspects medical fraud and wants to verify that you're actually a patient here. Mrs. Torres, in 20 years of working in obstetrics, I've never had a husband call to question his wife's pregnancy documentation. I stared out my childhood bedroom window at the mountains that had always provided comfort during difficult times, trying to process that Marcus was now involving medical professionals in his systematic destruction of my credibility and mental health. Furthermore, Sarah continued, he's requested paternity testing and suggested that we might need to investigate whether you've been using false identification to obtain medical care under another woman's insurance.
The scope of Marcus's betrayal was expanding beyond personal cruelty into potential legal and medical fraud allegations that could destroy my professional reputation as a veterinarian and my standing in the Colorado Springs community. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Rachel, I've hired a private investigator to document your activities over the past 3 months. If you're carrying another man's child, our families deserve to know the truth about your infidelity. The message included photographs of me at various locations around Colorado Springs, taken with telephoto lenses that suggested professional surveillance. Images of me entering restaurants, shopping centers, and medical offices, all documented with timestamps and location data as if I were a criminal suspect under investigation. Sarah, my husband has hired a private investigator to follow me and document my activities. He's trying to prove I'm having an affair to explain away our planned pregnancy. Mrs. Torres, this behavior is extremely concerning from a domestic abuse perspective. Surveillance, medical record challenges, and public accusations of infidelity are classic patterns of psychological abuse designed to isolate you from support systems. My mother knocked on my bedroom door and entered with the expression of someone who had been receiving disturbing phone calls. Rachel, honey, Marcus has been calling relatives and friends, telling them that you're having a mental breakdown and making false pregnancy claims to manipulate family attention. The systematic nature of his campaign was becoming clear. Marcus wasn't just attacking me privately. He was conducting a comprehensive character assassination designed to destroy my relationships, credibility, and support network throughout our community. He's also contacted your veterinary clinic, Mom continued carefully, questioning whether your recent mood changes and medical appointments might be affecting your professional judgment with animal patients. The attack on my career was the final straw. Marcus was now threatening my professional reputation and ability to support myself financially, using my pregnancy as evidence that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous to the animals in my care. Mom, he's trying to destroy every aspect of my life to avoid taking responsibility for our baby. My phone rang with a call from Colonel Mitchell, who was still at the base but had been monitoring the situation with military precision. Rachel, I've been making some calls about Marcus's behavior. Sweetheart, this isn't normal marital conflict. This is systematic psychological warfare designed to isolate you from every support system you have. Before I could respond, Dad's voice carried new urgency. There's something else, Marcus said. Marcus has been in contact with family court services, claiming you're having a mental health crisis that makes you unfit for custody of an unborn child. The situation spiraled beyond family conflict into legal warfare when Marcus's attorney, Jennifer Walsh, called to inform me that custody papers had been filed, claiming I was mentally incompetent to raise the child I was carrying. Her voice carried the professional sympathy of someone delivering devastating news while maintaining plausible deniability about the cruelty behind it. Mrs. Torres, my client has serious concerns about your mental health and its potential impact on fetal development and future parenting capabilities. I was sitting in Colonel Mitchell's home office, surrounded by military commendations and photographs from his decades of service, trying to process that my husband was now using the legal system to attack me before our baby was even born. Ms. Walsh, I'm a licensed veterinarian with no history of mental health issues. These allegations are completely fabricated. Mrs. Torres, my client has documentation showing erratic behavior, false medical claims, and what appears to be delusional thinking about pregnancy and family relationships. We're seeking court-ordered psychological evaluation and potential custody restrictions. Marcus had weaponized the family court system, using his accusations of infidelity and mental instability to preemptively claim custody of our unborn child while portraying himself as the responsible parent protecting a baby from an unfit mother. Before I could respond, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a process server standing on Dad's front porch with official documentation that would formalize Marcus's legal attack on my parenting rights and mental competency. Furthermore, Ms. Walsh continued, my client is prepared to request immediate supervised visitation upon birth with court-appointed monitors to ensure the child's safety, given your documented history of fabricating medical information and making false accusations against family members. The trap was expertly designed. Fighting the accusations would be interpreted as evidence of the mental instability Marcus claimed I suffered from, but accepting them would validate his claims and potentially cost me custody of my own child. Colonel Mitchell watched this conversation with growing fury, his military training recognizing psychological operations tactics being used against his own daughter. He gestured for me to put the call on speaker so he could hear the full scope of the legal assault Marcus had orchestrated against his own wife and unborn child. Miss Walsh, my client would like to offer a settlement that avoids prolonged legal proceedings, the attorney continued. If Mrs. Torres agrees to voluntary psychological treatment and accepts that paternity must be established through DNA testing, we're prepared to provide financial support for the child regardless of biological parentage. The offer was designed to sound generous, while actually forcing me to admit guilt for crimes I hadn't committed. Accepting psychological treatment would validate Marcus's claims about my mental health, while agreeing to paternity testing would acknowledge his accusations of infidelity. My phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. Mrs. Torres, this is David Park from Child Protective Services. We've received concerning reports about prenatal care and family stability that require immediate investigation. Marcus had escalated beyond family court into Child Protection Services, using government agencies to investigate me for child endangerment before our baby was even born. The systematic nature of his attack was becoming clear. He was using every available institution to destroy my credibility and parenting rights. Mr. Park, I'm receiving excellent prenatal care and have no history of child endangerment. These allegations are coming from my husband, who is trying to avoid responsibility for our planned pregnancy. Ma'am, we're required to investigate all reports involving potential harm to children, including unborn children. Someone needs to be present during our home visit to ensure proper documentation. Colonel Mitchell stepped closer to the phone, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with bureaucratic procedures and institutional power. Sir, this is Colonel James Mitchell, United States Air Force. I'll be present during any investigation involving my daughter, and I think you should know that these allegations appeared to be part of systematic harassment by an abusive spouse. The conversation had transformed from family conflict into federal oversight, with military authority beginning to recognize and respond to the coordinated attack Marcus had launched against his own wife and unborn child.
The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Major Patricia Rodriguez, the Air Force Family Life Counselor at Peterson Space Force Base, who called while I was preparing for the CPS home visit that Marcus had triggered with his false allegations. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who specialized in protecting military families from domestic threats and psychological warfare. Mrs. Torres, Colonel Mitchell briefed me on your situation. What your husband is doing isn't just marital conflict, it's systematic psychological operations designed to destroy your credibility and isolate you from support systems. Relief flooded through me as I realized that military family support specialists understood Marcus's tactics as warfare, rather than dismissing them as typical divorce drama. Major Rodriguez, he's convinced everyone that I'm mentally unstable and having an affair to explain away our pregnancy. Mrs. Torres, I've seen this pattern before in cases where civilian spouses target military families. The surveillance, false medical allegations, and preemptive custody claims are textbook psychological warfare tactics. Before I could process the full implications, Major Rodriguez continued with information that transformed my understanding of Marcus's behavior. We've been monitoring your husband's activities since Colonel Mitchell reported the situation. Mrs. Torres, Marcus has been researching military family support systems, legal procedures, and psychological evaluation processes for several months. The revelation was staggering. Marcus hadn't acted impulsively during our pregnancy announcement. He had been systematically planning this assault on my mental health and parenting rights long before I'd even conceived.
Furthermore, Major Rodriguez said, our investigation revealed that Marcus has been in contact with other estranged spouses who have successfully used similar tactics against military family members. He's been coached on how to weaponize family court and child protection services. My phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Amanda Torres, a military family psychologist who had been consulted about my case. Mrs. Torres, I've reviewed the documentation your husband submitted to various agencies. The allegations show clear patterns of projection and systematic character assassination that we recognize as domestic abuse tactics. Dr. Torres explained that Marcus's detailed surveillance records, medical record challenges, and family court filings followed established patterns used to isolate and control military spouses through institutional manipulation. The private investigator photos, the notebook documenting your activities, the false timeline claims, these are tools used to make victims question their own reality while building cases for custody and mental health allegations. Colonel Mitchell appeared in his office doorway with news that changed everything. Rachel, I've been working with the base legal office. Sweetheart, Marcus made a crucial mistake when he started targeting a military family. Dad explained that the Air Force had protocols for protecting service members and their families from psychological warfare, whether it came from foreign adversaries or domestic threats like abusive spouses. Major Patricia Santos from Base Legal Services is driving over with documentation that will stop Marcus's legal assault immediately. Military families have protections that civilian courts must recognize and respect. The support was overwhelming after months of feeling isolated and attacked. Military family advocacy specialists, legal experts, and psychological professionals were mobilizing to protect me from Marcus's systematic campaign. There's something else, Major Rodriguez added. Your husband's employer has been contacted about his use of company resources for personal surveillance activities. Marcus used work computers and company time to research psychological warfare tactics and coordinate his attack on your family. Dr. Torres joined the conversation with information that provided context for Marcus's behavior. Mrs. Torres, men who target pregnant wives often do so because pregnancy represents loss of control and increased responsibility. Your husband's response suggests antisocial personality traits that make him dangerous to both you and your unborn child. For the first time since Marcus destroyed our pregnancy announcement, I felt protected by institutions that understood psychological warfare and had the authority to stop it. The Air Force wasn't just supporting me as Colonel Mitchell's daughter, they were protecting a military family from domestic terrorism.
Colonel James Mitchell walked through the family court doors at exactly 2 p.m., flanked by Major Patricia Santos from Base Legal Services, and carrying documentation that would expose Marcus's psychological warfare campaign for what it truly was. He wore his dress uniform with full decorations, sending an immediate message that this was military business rather than civilian family dispute. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney Jennifer Walsh, confident in his strategy of portraying me as mentally unstable while positioning himself as the responsible spouse protecting an unborn child from an unfit mother. He looked up as the military officials entered, his expression shifting from satisfaction to confusion as he registered the level of institutional authority that had arrived to counter his legal assault. "Your Honor," Colonel Mitchell announced, his voice carrying the command presence that had earned respect in military operations around the world. "I'm Colonel James Mitchell, United States Air Force. I'm here representing my daughter, Mrs. Rachel Torres, who has been subjected to systematic psychological warfare by her civilian husband." Judge Patricia Williams presided over the hearing with the stern authority of someone experienced in military family cases that involved both civilian law and federal protocols. She studied the documentation that Major Santos presented, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Mr. Torres," Judge Williams said, consulting the evidence that military legal services had compiled, "you're accused of conducting surveillance operations against your pregnant wife, making false allegations to multiple agencies, and using psychological warfare tactics to isolate her from family support systems." Marcus's attorney stood to object, but Major Santos interrupted with the confidence of someone presenting federal evidence. "Your Honor, the defendant has systematically targeted a military family using tactics that are recognized as domestic terrorism under federal law."
She displayed timeline charts showing Marcus's months of planning, his research into military family vulnerabilities, and his coordination with other individuals who had successfully destroyed military marriages through similar psychological operations. Furthermore, the defendant used company resources to conduct surveillance and research psychological manipulation techniques, which violates both employment contracts and potentially federal communications laws. Marcus finally spoke, his voice lacking the confidence he displayed during our family dinner. "Your Honor, I'm simply concerned about my wife's mental health and the safety of our unborn child. Everything I've done has been motivated by legitimate family concerns." Colonel Mitchell stepped forward with the authority of someone who had identified enemy tactics in combat situations. "Your Honor, the defendant's legitimate concerns include hiring private investigators to follow my daughter, making false reports to Child Protective Services, and claiming she's having an affair to avoid paternity responsibility." The evidence was overwhelming when presented by military legal experts who understood psychological warfare. Marcus's detailed surveillance, his systematic attack on my credibility, and his preemptive custody claims were revealed as coordinated assault rather than concerned husband behavior. Mr. Torres, Judge Williams said, reviewing the complete documentation, "The court finds that your allegations against your wife appear to be part of systematic harassment designed to avoid parental responsibility while damaging her mental health and professional reputation." Marcus's confidence finally cracked as he realized that military family protection protocols were more powerful than civilian manipulation tactics. "Your Honor, I'm not trying to avoid responsibility. I just need proof that this baby is actually mine." Colonel Mitchell's expression shifted to something beyond professional duty into personal protective fury. "Son, you publicly accused my daughter of adultery in front of both families, hired investigators to stalk her daily activities, and filed false reports claiming she was mentally incompetent. That's not seeking paternity confirmation, that's psychological terrorism against a pregnant woman." The room fell silent as the weight of military authority confronted civilian cowardice. Marcus had expected to control the narrative through legal manipulation, but he hadn't anticipated facing institutional power that recognized his tactics as warfare against American military families.
The custody hearing transformed into something resembling a military tribunal as Judge Williams called for a comprehensive review of all evidence, testimony, and expert analysis that would determine not just parental rights, but whether Marcus faced criminal charges for his systematic campaign against a military family. The gallery was filled with Air Force personnel and military family advocates who had come to witness how civilian courts handled domestic terrorism against service members. "Mrs. Torres," Judge Williams said, gesturing for me to take the witness stand, "please describe the timeline of events that led to these custody and mental health allegations." I walked the witness stand carrying the ultrasound photos that had been dismissed as fabricated evidence during Marcus's attack on our pregnancy announcement. The images of our healthy, developing baby seemed surreal in the context of a courtroom battle over my competency as a mother. "Your Honor, my husband and I planned this pregnancy together. We discussed names, nursery themes, and parenting approaches. I spent weeks preparing a special announcement for both our families, wanting to create a beautiful memory of sharing this news. As I described the dinner where Marcus had destroyed our pregnancy announcement, accusing me of infidelity and mental instability, I could see the judge's expression growing more disturbed with each detail of his calculated cruelty. He suggested that I was either lying about being pregnant or carrying another man's child, despite our marriage being completely faithful and this pregnancy being the result of months of trying to conceive together. Major Santos presented timeline evidence showing Marcus's months of preparation, including his research into military family legal procedures and psychological evaluation processes. Your Honor, the defendant began planning this assault before Mrs. Torres even conceived. He researched how to weaponize family court systems against military spouses. Dr. Amanda Torres, the military family psychologist, took the stand to provide expert testimony about Marcus's tactics and their psychological impact.
Your Honor, what the defendant executed was a textbook psychological warfare campaign designed to isolate Mrs. Torres from all support systems while making her question her own reality and mental health. She explained how Marcus's surveillance, false allegations, and systematic character assassination followed established patterns used to destroy military marriages through institutional manipulation rather than direct confrontation. The private investigator photos, the detailed notebook documenting Mrs. Torres's activities, and the false timeline calculations were all designed to create the appearance of evidence while actually documenting normal pregnant woman behavior as suspicious activity. Marcus's attorney attempted to cross-examine me, suggesting that pregnancy hormones might be affecting my interpretation of normal marital disagreements. Mrs. Torres, isn't it possible that stress and hormonal changes have made you more sensitive to your husband's legitimate concerns about your recent behavior? Colonel Mitchell rose from his seat in the gallery, his voice cutting through the courtroom with military authority. Counselor, are you suggesting that psychological warfare becomes acceptable when directed at pregnant women? Because that's exactly the kind of victim blaming that enables domestic abuse. Judge Williams sustained the objection before it was formally made, recognizing that military family protection protocols prohibited psychological manipulation regardless of the victim's emotional state or physical condition. When Marcus took the stand in his own defense, his testimony revealed the depth of his manipulation and the calculated nature of his attack on our marriage and my mental health. Your Honor, I love my wife, but her behavior during pregnancy became increasingly erratic and concerning. I documented her activities because I was worried about her mental state and its potential impact on our child's development. Mr. Torres, said Major Santos during cross-examination, you hired private investigators to photograph your wife entering medical offices, restaurants, and shopping centers. How does documenting normal daily activities demonstrate concern for mental health? Marcus's explanation was unconvincing and contradictory. I needed evidence to support my observations about her secretive behavior and possible extramarital relationships. Mr. Torres, you've been married for 2 years. Has your wife ever given you reason to suspect infidelity before this pregnancy? The pause was telling. No, but pregnancy can change women's behavior in unpredictable ways. Dr. Torres returned to the stand to address Marcus's claims about pregnancy affecting women's behavior. Your Honor, while pregnancy involves hormonal changes, it doesn't cause women to fabricate medical appointments, engage in extramarital affairs, or develop delusional thinking. Mr. Torres's allegations are based on misogynistic stereotypes rather than medical reality.
The expert testimony was devastating to Marcus's credibility. Military psychologists, family advocates, and legal specialists had systematically dismantled every aspect of his psychological warfare campaign. Judge Williams called for final arguments, and Major Santos presented the case with military precision. Your Honor, the evidence shows systematic psychological terrorism designed to avoid parental responsibility while destroying Mrs. Torres's mental health, professional reputation, and family relationships. She presented financial records showing Marcus's payments to private investigators, his research into military family vulnerabilities, and his coordination with other individuals who had successfully used similar tactics against service members' families. This isn't marital conflict or concerned fatherhood. This is domestic terrorism against a military family, and it requires consequences that protect both Mrs. Torres and her unborn child from continued psychological assault. Marcus's attorney made a final attempt to portray his client's behavior as misguided concern rather than calculated abuse. Your Honor, Mr. Torres may have used poor judgment, but his motivations were protective rather than malicious. Colonel Mitchell requested permission to address the court as both a character witness and military family protection advocate. Your Honor, I have served in combat zones where psychological warfare was used against American personnel.
What my son-in-law executed against my pregnant daughter was more sophisticated and comprehensive than tactics used by foreign adversaries. His words carried the weight of decades defending American families from threats both foreign and domestic, and the courtroom fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Marcus Torres declared war on his own family, Colonel Mitchell concluded. Military families deserve protection from domestic terrorism regardless of its source.
The gavel came down with the weight of institutional justice, and Judge Williams' words echoed through the family courtroom like a declaration that psychological warfare against military families would face the full consequences of both civilian and federal law. Marcus Torres, your custody petition is denied. Furthermore, you are hereby ordered to pay full restitution for legal costs, undergo mandatory psychological evaluation, and are prohibited from contact with Mrs. Torres and your child except through court-supervised visitation. I watched my husband led away by bailiffs, his confidence finally shattered by the realization that military family protection protocols were more powerful than civilian manipulation tactics. Colonel Mitchell stood beside me, his hands steady on my shoulder, representing not just paternal support, but the institutional authority that had transformed my personal trauma into a federal case study in protecting military families from domestic terrorism. The months following Marcus's legal defeat brought revelations that expanded my understanding of his psychological warfare campaign far beyond what even military investigators had initially uncovered. Family advocacy specialists discovered that Marcus had been part of online communities where estranged spouses shared tactics for destroying military marriages through systematic character assassination and institutional manipulation. Major Patricia Rodriguez visited regularly with updates that transformed Marcus's attack on our family into part of a much larger victory for military family protection services. Rachel, your case has become a template for identifying and prosecuting domestic terrorism against service members. Marcus's systematic approach was so comprehensive that we've created new protocols based on his methods. The scope of protection was staggering. What had felt like personal betrayal had actually been the catalyst for federal policy changes that would protect thousands of military families from similar psychological warfare campaigns. Marcus's research into military family vulnerabilities has helped us identify security gaps that foreign adversaries could exploit, Major Rodriguez continued. Your courage in fighting back has actually strengthened national security protocols around service family protection. 6 months later, I stood before a Senate Armed Services Subcommittee, testifying about my experience as part of new legislation designed to classify psychological warfare against military families as domestic terrorism. My pregnancy was now visible, a growing reminder of the child Marcus had tried to deny and the future he had attempted to destroy through systematic cruelty. Senators, I told the committee, civilian spouses who target military families understand that service members are trained to handle foreign threats, but may be unprepared for domestic enemies who use their own family relationships as weapons. The Military Family Protection Act that emerged from my testimony would create new federal crimes for psychological warfare against service families, enhanced penalties for false allegations targeting military personnel, and specialized courts for handling domestic terrorism cases involving Defense Department families. Colonel Mitchell's career had been transformed rather than damaged by our experience with Marcus's psychological operations. His leadership during the crisis had demonstrated expertise in recognizing and countering domestic threats that led to his appointment as Director of Military Family Security, overseeing protection protocols for all service branches. The president wants me to lead a new joint task force on domestic terrorism targeting military families, Dad told me over dinner one evening 7 months after Marcus's legal defeat.
We're creating protocols to identify and neutralize psychological warfare campaigns before they can destroy service families. The most profound transformation was in my own sense of purpose and healing. The pregnancy that Marcus had weaponized so effectively had become the symbol of resilience and institutional protection that extended far beyond my individual situation. My unborn child represented not just personal vindication, but the power of military families to defend themselves against domestic enemies. Dr. Amanda Torres, the military psychologist who had helped expose Marcus's tactics, visited regularly to discuss my recovery and my potential role in training other military families to recognize and resist psychological warfare. Rachel, your case has become required study for military family advocates across all service branches, she explained. Your ability to maintain your professional effectiveness while under systematic attack has demonstrated resilience that can be taught to other service families facing similar targeting. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus's attempt to destroy my effectiveness as a military daughter had instead made me invaluable to military family protection services, connecting me with resources and opportunities that exceeded anything I'd imagined possible in my original career as a veterinarian. As I prepared for the birth of my daughter, the child Marcus had claimed probably wasn't even his, I reflected on how completely our lives had been transformed. DNA testing had confirmed what I had always known. Marcus was the biological father of a child he had tried to disown through systematic character assassination and psychological warfare. The baby girl I carried represented more than personal vindication. She was proof that military families could not be destroyed by domestic enemies who used love and trust as weapons. Her existence validated every aspect of my testimony, every legal battle, every moment of standing firm against institutional pressure to surrender to Marcus's manipulation. Colonel Mitchell and I had resumed planning for his granddaughter's future, this time with the knowledge that military family protection services would ensure she grew up safe from the kind of psychological warfare that had nearly destroyed their parents' marriage. Marcus's betrayal had taught us that the most dangerous enemies often came disguised as loving spouses, but it had also revealed the power of institutional protection to defend military families against threats that individual families couldn't face alone. The pregnancy announcement he had tried to destroy had ultimately strengthened the very systems designed to protect American service families from domestic and foreign enemies alike.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.